Welcome, innovative teachers. The wonderful thing about STEM is that it opens up a world of possibilities and what it can look like in your room. Have you ever thought about adding in movement into your STEM routine? Today, we have Kylie Burett, the teacher and creator of Splat. It's a 3D geometric tool, and she is an expert on how to get kids moving and think critically simultaneously. Also, if you're already loving our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. This helps spread the word to other innovative teachers who would love to connect to our community. Stay tuned for a great episode full of lots of useful information. We can't wait to learn and grow with you. All right, Kylie, I'm so excited to chat with you. We're all three of us are across the world today. So it's so exciting that we can connect together through a podcast and connect with other teachers in their ears too. So it's super exciting. So I am excited about your story, but I'm sure our listeners are as well. So tell us about yourself and your journey to what you're doing these days.
Okay, so I am a teacher. And I have a passion for STEM. So I was doing my Master's of Education in Information Science when we were doing a lot of design thinking and research into STEM and what it means to teach STEM and the foundational elements. And what happened is that I found it fascinating that the visual spatial development of children through geometric thinking and spatial awareness was not being developed early enough in terms of children's developmental capabilities. And so leaving this later to develop it later in high school was actually causing students to become disadvantaged and also disconnected from their opportunities, because it is a fundamental foundational skill that is needed across every single area of STEM. And current research shows that it's the number one predictor in long-term success in STEM. So, and what we now know is that we need to develop this skill in the early and primary years more so than ever.
Wow, that's amazing. So you noticed this information. Did you go into teaching right after, or then did you start your business right away? Like, how did you connect all this together?
Oh, it's quite interesting. I went into education through film and media, believe it or not. I worked on the Sydney Olympics randomly.
Cool.
And I worked with a really amazing team of psychologists and educators as part of that. And what it actually, I guess, resulted in is my fascination with education and psychology. And I was a bit lost at that point because film and education, film and TV I didn't feel passionate about it like I do about education. And so the team said to me, do an education degree.
Oh.
And so it's actually in my 20s that I started in education, but it was when I had my children at home and I was on maternity leave. I have 5 children that I decided to retrain because, like, my hand on heart, being in the classroom is so much work, and trying to raise a family, I really needed to pick my battles in terms of where I spread my energy. And so I decided to retrain as a specialist, a STEM specialist, and that's how come I moved into this lane. So I'd already been a classroom teacher for some time. So yeah.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners can connect. I mean, not all of them are teachers. We have some homeschool parents also. And so they might have that feeling like, oh, I need to learn new things and how to engage and go a different path. So that's pretty cool. So what was your planning process through that? So you have all this background, you have all this knowledge. How did you plan to create something to engage kids in STEM? Like what, how you're like, I have an idea.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. You know, I think like many things in life and sort of my own experience is that I'm not a real linear thinker. I'll do this and then I'll do this. I'm sort of like a splattergun, you know, like it's almost like, you know, one neuron fires off and then it's just like, you know, 10 other ones will. And it's the connection of opportunities and skill sets. So what actually happened is that my husband was burnt out from teaching.
Mhm.
He needed change. And I was really struggling in the classroom as a STEM educator, trying to get students to value visualizing designs so that they could be more purposeful and intentional and successful at creating in STEM. So my husband and I had a lot of talks, and at one point I just said, you know, honey, how do you do it? How do you teach kids to actually design and get their ideas down on paper? Because we need to be doing it with kids younger, because they're missing this, and then they get to high school and they're expected to draw and visually articulate their ideas, and they're not confident to do it. And so him and I started our own sort of process of working with our youngest children and designing this on our kitchen bench late at night. It was just like two educators like you and Spencer getting together and thinking, you know, that doesn't work. Let's do something different. And then I started telling people about my ideas. And I pretty much got laughed down, but I was super passionate that my husband and I were onto something. And it was that passion that then drove me to get serious about it. And that's when things really started to shift, when we believed in ourselves.
That's awesome.
That's crazy to me that like people laughed about it, because like kids always, at least when I'm teaching kids and we're teaching like all this stuff you're saying, all this, you know, design and, you know, the thinking behind it, I'm always telling them like break everything down into shapes. Everything can be broken down into shapes, and you can really think about it as multiple ones put together. Like I am not a good freehand drawer at all, but when I do things digitally and I can have a bunch of shapes, like shape tools in Google Slide, I do great. And the kids are always like, oh man, like how'd you do that? I'm like, I just arrange a bunch of shapes in a certain order. So it's crazy to me too that people thought that. That's nuts, because that's such a cool and unique thing to think about. And I just love that you guys concentrated on the design component. And when you were talking the whole time, I was trying to find my pen, because you said like 2 or 3 things and I was like, I should have wrote that down. I couldn't find my pen, because there were so many great things you said about design. And I know Naomi and I have talked about this a lot on the podcast, in our free time when we're just talking, or other STEM teachers, is how hard that design component is to teach. So when you're looking at like Splat and what it does, how do you see it kind of changing that design component?
Yeah, well, I guess the fundamental reason why people laughed me down was because how young I was proposing students start to do this in 3D.
Oh, they need to get a class.
So so I'm saying, no, they can do it in kindergarten. They've been building an isometric probably for 2 years before they come to school with Lego. So if you look at Lego instructions, you'll see that they're all an isometric. It's the natural way that the brain perceives objects. And so this is how you break it down. And this is how we broke it down into the most simple elements, is that for engineering design, there are only 5 core objects that are required for designing anything. And so, and so when you go into a, into a classroom and kids are overwhelmed, like just create anything you want. It's too much. Giving them freedom is incredible, but design is often about limitations and working within limitations. And it can be very overwhelming for students to just simply, you know, design these creative elements where everything else in school is very linear and, you know, sort of tick this box and then you move on to this box. So what we did was we focused on developing a way that we could teach children to create each of those 5 objects in 3D in 3 easy steps.
Wow.
So that was it. It was identifying those critical elements that are needed for engineering design. While they're doing it, they're also developing their geometric thinking and spatial awareness, because it's in the manipulation of the tool, which we're creating pathways neurologically. It's no different to handwriting. And it's incredibly important because there is a part in our brain that is actually dedicated to using tools to amplify something that we do. That's why computers are so popular and bikes. And, it's like, cool, this makes it easier. And so that was the intention behind the Splat. I wanted to hand it to somebody, and I wanted to see their student light up with joy that they were able to succeed at something that they previously hadn't been able to do, and see that confidence grow. So those breaking it down for teachers into those 5 core objects is a winner.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then just learning how to connect them.
I think I really like that you said that they felt overwhelmed, because I've never once thought when kids were going to design something like, man, do they feel overwhelmed? Like, it's like one of those things, like, because my brain's developed in that part, and I'm an adult, I'm always like, come on, like, this isn't hard. You're making this more complicated than it is. But to think of it the way that you are thinking about it, blowing my mind right now, because I've never thought about it this way. And like you said, breaking it down in those components and making something that's overly complicated or overwhelming so simple. So you touched a little bit, but I wanted you to touch a little bit more on, you talked about like the geometry behind it and the math component. And I know like that's something that's really hard to hit in STEM for some people, when they're doing a lesson and they want to hit that STEM from their school standards. How does, the geometry kind of come into play, and how do you see it kind of leaving a lasting impact on students?
Yeah, well, basically, the way it's targeted in our curriculum out here is that the Splat is actually great for studying geometry and measurement. So when you're looking at angles, the isometric axis is a great one to look at. We used to do it as optical illusions. How do we make something appear 3D while it's flat on paper? We need to use angles, and the angle that does that is the isometric angle. And so when we're designing, we're looking at the volume of shapes. We're looking at like stability then, like the volume. We're looking at the properties of those objects and shapes, and we're looking at different views. So when we're looking at a 2D view, we're looking at the shapes, but when we're looking at a 3D view, we're looking at objects. So the shape in 3D. And so, so that's how we link it. So it's angles, it's visualization of those, and also of the different objects and what shapes they link to and how they appear different in different perspectives. So we can go on to measurement and all different types of components that get more complex. One of the things that I love is actually challenging students to create objects, particularly just a cube, and then work out what it looks like from every side, and so
Wow.
with the design. So, like that, it's amazing. Design is incredibly powerful because it takes the complex and makes it simple.
Yes.
And so when we're adding complexity to our students' design, we're not actually teaching them design. It goes against the fundamental principle of what good design is. Teaching them the fundamentals and allowing them to apply that in all different contexts with different types of limitations really strengthens their design thinking muscles. It's a really powerful. A lot of students do need to move when they're designing. Young children were not made to sit for hours endlessly, manipulating things with their hands, feeling it, having the sensory experience. That all enhances and enriches the student's experience. So so I guess that's where I see that. I go on and on. Sorry, I'm gonna talk forever.
No, that was awesome.
So good.
Yeah, and I heard like 5 or 6 things that this made me be like, wow, because you don't think about design thinking in STEM sometimes as like a separate thing that you should be teaching. It's more or less looked at like a step-by-step process. But I feel like when you have something like what you've made, it's broken that down and it's made that very simple for kids to use. It's simplified something that, if I'm being honest, that's like one of the questions we get a lot, don't we, Naomi, where people are like, well, how do you teach the kids to design? What is different things you say to them? And I'm like, well, a lot of times, I say this and this to them, and they still bring me a picture of a one-dimensional, object, and they really haven't thought it out. And then when they go to build it, they kind of are set for failure in that way. So I think it's like you said, like taking that one, taking this thinking and translating it to this thinking that's just phenomenal to me. And being able to get that experience because of what you've made in the Splat. What are like, do you have any like cool stories that would kind of like go along with it? Like the aha moments. Those are always fun. I always like those ones.
You know what, I do find I have a lot of aha moments when I'm working in the classroom with students, like
Mhm.
goosebumps. I have teachers tell me when they use it in their classroom, and I think that is what drives me on days where I feel like, like I can't keep going, or I'm going to have to, go back to the classroom and juggle the classroom and, working the business, like, so I think it is really what drives me is those aha moments, is sharing them. That is fundamentally why we became teachers. Well, why I became a teacher, because I wanted to, we teach because we were hopeful, at the end of the day, because we love what we do. And so, yeah, those aha moments are amazing. Kids rarely ever meet product designers. So when I go into the classroom and they meet me and they realize that I'm the crazy splat lady, they are absolutely blown away to meet an inventor. And it's incredible. If I had written a book and it had sold as many copies worldwide, I'd be well known, but product designers are generally anonymous. And they're anonymous often for a reason. It's a personality trait, I think, and very artistic and engineered. Like their mind is very interested in engineering and focused on a task. So they're not normally rah-rah. Proof is normally in the way people engage with the product. Students find it fascinating to think that the Splat wasn't the first design.
Yeah, that's how I was. Like when we met. So for people listening, we're all in the Make Your Mark by Casey Moore. So we're all like part of her student group, and that's kind of how we met. Like the first thing I did was like I looked at your website, I was looking at everything, and I'm like, surely someone has done this. Like surely, but there's not another one out there like this, is there?
No, there's not.
Cool.
That's mind blowing.
Super. Like I love the shape.
It's mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
The shape of it, I know that too. I love the shape of it.
Yeah, like it's super like simple in a good way. Like it doesn't seem overwhelming, but when you're looking at it, you can tell that, because I'm looking on my other screen, you can tell it has all these possibilities to create something so amazing. And it's super attainable for a kid, for sure.
And I can see like the value in what you said too. And that was one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Like I can see it being used in kindergarten. I really can. And I could see kids like, even if you had to walk them through like a step-by-step the first couple of times and do some like explicit instructions with them figuring out like, oh, now I could do this, or now I could try this, like we talked about earlier, manipulating things, trying something different than what they're used to. And then I could see it being used all the way up until like almost like middle school. Like I have 6th graders, which is considered middle school for most schools, but I could see a lot of those kids using it, and they have a makerspace in the high school, and I could see those kids using it because so much of the time when they go from that one stage to the next, it doesn't turn out the way they want to, because here they weren't thinking of it the way, they can with that tool. And that blows me away every time I think about it too, because even when I'm doing, like, if you can see behind me, like my wood pallet wall, like I could have used one of those tools right there for that, because like I was measuring everything and I was doing it freehand with my hand, and it looked like a 6-year-old wrote it, rather than, something that would look a little bit nicer and make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, for senior students now, we've just got our first batch of clear splats.
Oh, cool.
So that was actually requested in terms of feedback from teachers.
Yeah.
So senior teachers, some schools over here have adopted it school-wide. So more often than not, we have like schools buying one for every student at home and at school. And the senior classes now have, so we've created a clear one so that older students can get more complex. Now, this is for rapid ideation. It's not like a technical drawing tool. It lends itself to that in the older years, but it really is focused on rapidly visualizing and teaching how to create that 3D perspective. So it's almost a little bit like training wheels, but students love them so much that now they come clear. So.
going to buy these for my class. Like I have money left in my
Yeah.
budget. I'm getting these. I needed them today in kindergarten. They're trying to draw sheep in the Jeep. Let me
Oh,
tell you, they
right.
needed a splat.
I'll do you a tutorial,
Perfect.
Naomi.
Yeah.
Perfect. We needed some work on
Um,
those Jeeps.
one of the things I was going to ask, you're talking about like the difference between like the seniors and the younger kids. Is it the same like product, right? Whether it's that younger grade to the older grade, it's just a different color, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, like I said, originally the tool was much bigger and complex, and I had a very, very small budget. I had $5,000. That is it.
That's very small
right?
for
And
a
I
startup. Yeah.
very small startup. We have a lot of mouths to feed, and my husband and I like we can't make something with our skill set for that amount. And so it was much bigger. And so there are other Splat tools actually.
Okay.
But I couldn't afford to get it made. And so actually the winning element of the Splat that you see now is its simplicity. We stripped it of anything other than the essential items that the younger students would need, or a beginner, because we can develop this skill set at any age. So it's quite interesting that there are other Splats.
Yeah, I was just curious because when you said that, I was like, I wonder if it's the same tool, if it's a little bit different. So that's kind of cool. I mean, it's definitely like different but the same. Like you said, it's went down to some simplicity, but definitely. And I love this tool, and I love like everything that you've actually said to us so far about design, just because that's something I feel like we get a lot of questions on Instagram or Facebook group, all those different places where people are like, hey, the podcast too, when people ask us, hey, how do you get kids to design more effective plans? How do you get them to do that? And I mean, there's a lot of good answers out there as far as what you could say to them. But I feel like something like this, where it's a visual representation, makes all the difference in the world. And I feel like you've definitely explained that very well.
Thank you. Well, our goal is to bring diversity to design and to the STEM industry. And if we can't develop this skill, then we're failing at bringing diversity. So the idea behind the tool is it is inexpensive. It takes no batteries, and basically it's accessible for all children and teachers. All our resources are free. So accessibility is really, really important here. You don't have to own a computer. There's nothing fancy about it. And hopefully that lowers the barrier for students everywhere to take up these incredibly future focused design skills.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like I could sit and listen to you talk for hours about design, because I feel like I wrote down more stuff for this episode than maybe I ever have, as far as like stuff to take away from me in my classroom. So we appreciate you being on with us. It's been incredible. Can you tell us where our listeners can find you, and maybe some exciting things that you're looking forward to in the future?
Yeah, sure. So COVID has upset a few of our plans. They've been postponed or different things. So there's some elements of projects that we're working on that have been postponed or delayed slightly. The one that I'm most excited about at the moment is our 5 for Design program. So previously it was just 100 design lessons, 5 minutes, that students and teachers could access. We have decided to turn those into video lessons this year. They will be freely available on our YouTube channel, which is Splat 3D. Our website is Splat 3D, and Insta and Twitter, Splat 3D. So, and our website has a host of free resources. So check us out at splat3d.com, and we're open to answering any questions or supporting teachers in any way that we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I know we appreciate you being on today and meeting with us. And really, like I said, I feel like I learned a lot and took a lot away. So we appreciate you.
Yay. Okay. This is just awesome. I'm so happy to connect with like-minded teachers, and thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. Hopefully they will take something really positive away from this.
Yes. So we loved creating this episode for you guys today. Make sure you follow us for more great episodes here and on Instagram, as we are trying to keep on posting on there constantly. Next thing, do you have a teacher business? Because we're looking for partners. So we have our innovative teacher corner that we have started reaching out to people, and we're looking to give you an opportunity to get onto the Innovative Teacher Podcast Corner and for us to start talking about all the awesome things you do. If you're interested in collaborating with us or marketing with us, or maybe even an interview or presenting at your school, please email us at innovativeteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Last thing, if you've forgotten, we do have a Patreon. So make sure you head over to our Patreon page and you can be part of our members. Make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform so you can be updated on the I can hardly say that, the latest release. Make sure you follow us on social media. Thank you, Innovative Teachers, for listening today. We'll see you in the next episode.